Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our final session of the day, which has been just really amazing. And it's been so great to have you all with us on what is our fourth of 5 days of the Arts Summit, the Virtual Arts Summit. As a reminder, we will have our closing keynote tomorrow, which is Beth Cantor, who will speak about, how to get through in what has been a really complicated and rough year because of COVID-19. So we're excited to have Beth, and we're also excited that the governor will be kicking us off in this session tomorrow. So we hope that you will all be able to join us tomorrow. For those of you who haven't been on the calls before, my name is Michael Lang, and I use the pronouns he, him, and I am the executive director of the Wyoming Arts Council. If you would like or need to use captions, we do have the Zoom's live transcription feature on. You can add subtitles by clicking on the CC Live Transcript button on the bottom of your screen. Additionally, in an effort to be more inclusive to those who are not able to join us visually, we have been asking all of our speakers today to introduce their physical experience. For me, I am a white male who is 40. I'm wearing a black collared shirt with the Wyoming Arts Council logo on the left shoulder, and I have short white and gray colored hair. I am joining you from my home office where I sit in a high back brown chair, and I have a tan colored wall behind me. I think Anne-Marie's session, I think it's going to be really great today. And I just want to toss out to everyone, we recognize this is the end of a long day and an end of kind of a long week of really great sessions with really great information. But we would love for you to still be engaged as possible. So do what you need to do. If you need to get up, if you need to put yourself on not have your screen on because you have some other things to do, we want you to be as fully engaged as possible and get as much from this session as you possibly can. So please do what you need to be with us today. We will also have a time at the end for questions and comments, but there will be times for you to interact and do throughout the entire session that Anne-Marie has scheduled. So if you have any questions, please always feel free to use the chat, but also recognize we will have a bit of time at the end. All right, so why don't I give a short introduction and then hand it over. So Anne-Marie Wells is from Jackson, Wyoming, and is a poet, playwright, and storyteller. In 2018, she was an inaugural recipient of the Marius P. Hanford IV Award presented by Riot Act, Inc. for Best New Play. In 2020, she and her bilingual children's book were featured on Wyoming PBS's Storytime with Wyoming Authors series. Anne-Marie's session is titled Healing Through the Arts. Please help me in welcoming Anne-Marie Wells.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. I am Anne-Marie Wells. I use she or they pronouns. So either one that you want to use, I feel comfortable with. I am a white woman in her 30s, and I have long brown hair with brown bangs. And today I'm wearing kind of like a dark brown fuzzy sweater. I am sitting in a chair that has a maroon and beige blanket on it, and there is a dark blue curtain behind me that has cutout stars in it. So I want to welcome everyone to my session. I write mostly poetry, and so my session is poetry focused. Though if you use a different art form, then I want to invite you to extrapolate from poetry. If you're more of a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer, please feel free to do that. If you're more of a drawer or a painter and maybe want to brainstorm some ideas or do some sketches, then I welcome you to do that as well. In my session today, I have 2 different exercises that I will walk participants through. And then if you want to share what you've created at the end, then you're welcome to do that, though that is not obligatory. You don't have to participate. Though at the end, if you also have questions, that would be the time. I won't be taking a look at the chat during my presentation, but when we have some time to ourselves to write or to sketch or to do whatever, then I will take a look at the chat and try to answer questions if they're pertinent. If not, I'll try to make it more of a discussion at the end. I'm going to go ahead and open up my presentation. And if I could just get a thumbs up reaction from anyone, just allowing me to know that you can see my screen. Great, thank you, Michael. So like I mentioned, I'm mostly a poet, so my exercises are focused more on poetry, but please take the opportunity to extrapolate from poetry if that is not your medium. I also want to invite everyone to some resources if this session brings up anything for you. This is not supposed to be a substitute for any kind of professional therapy. These are just exercises that I used during my healing journey that I felt were effective for me. And so I wanted to share them with everyone else. Though if something does come up for you, I will have these numbers throughout the session today. So please utilize resources available if you do feel like you need some specialized guidance. I also want to do a quick land acknowledgement. I know that Wyoming Arts Council did do a land acknowledgement at the beginning of the summit, but I think it's important as part of a healing journey to also acknowledge the healing that we can contribute to. So the historical harm that has been done, what healing can we do in order to ameliorate that? And I just want to acknowledge that I am committed to continue learning how to be a better steward of the land that I inhabit. And I want to indefinitely commit myself to respecting and reconciling this long history of injustice and trauma to Indigenous communities. All right, so in our first exercise today, we're going to be looking at the poetry of myself and also of Dinesh Smith. And so in this first exercise, I just want to take about 30 seconds to a minute, and I just want everyone to jot down a list of words that delight you. And this might be names of people, it might be places, it might just be words that you think sound silly if you really like the word hippopotamus. Or it might be things that you enjoy, a warm bath, foods that you like, your dog, just anything that comes into your mind, just allowing your brain to not really think too much about it and to just write down a list of words that delight you. And even if your medium is not writing, I think that this is still pertinent to the exercise. So I'm just going to put a timer on for now, 40 seconds. And I'm just going to write down some things that delight me. Okay, that is time. Here is a list that I wrote when I was first making this, and it'll be interesting to see if the list is the same. So on the list that I just wrote, I have stained glass windows, which I see is in my other list, rescue dogs, lemonade, blankets, picnics, lotion, exercising, mountains, and naps. And those are just some examples. So now I want to think about the thing that we cannot say out loud, the thing that maybe we're holding on to, the thing that maybe we're hiding, burying, something that is difficult to say. Maybe it's a negative experience, maybe it's more of a traumatic experience, maybe it's related to grief, maybe it's related to to pain. Maybe it's related to illness. Maybe it's related to a relationship, something from our lives that is still haunting us. And working on utilizing saying the thing in our mind, not necessarily saying it out loud, to move forward in the exercise. This is a poem that I wrote about this exercise. It's called Fear Interrupted. Twist fear's words, put them in his mouth, speak on his behalf without permission. You don't have to listen to be polite. Forget about hearing him out, considering his side of the story. Don't let him finish his sentences when he tries to tell you your mother will die alone of a broken heart. Say, yes, you are right. My mother will dance alone with a songbird heart, and there will be nothing I can do about it. And so what we're going to do essentially is take the thing that we cannot say and interrupt that negativity, interrupt that fear, interrupt that pain with the words that delight us. When we're thinking about the thing that we cannot say, the thing that is following us through our lifetime that we're unable to let go, it is better to add specificity to it. So for example, I was abused is very vague. Abuse can be many different things. It can be many different facets. So instead of using the words, I was abused, you could say something more specific. My mother hit me across the face with a wine bottle. That is very specific. It has people, it has a scene. We know what the action is. My brother died because of me. That could mean a lot of things. That could mean that the speaker actually killed their brother. It could be because of an interaction that they had. And so to add specificity to it, my brother hung himself after I didn't answer his phone call. So trying to be as specific as possible and creating that scene. Now we're going to use that specific image and we're going to replace some of the words with the words that delight us. I create the analogy that it's kind of like the Bogart banishing spell in Harry Potter. So if you're not familiar with that, essentially what it does, the ridiculous spell, is that it turns whatever scares you the most into something ridiculous. So you're laughing at it and then it's no longer something that scares you. So in this scene, Ron is terrified of spiders. A giant spider comes out of the closet there. And when he uses the spell ridiculous, roller skates are put on the ends of the spider's feet. And the spider is ended up dancing all over the wooden floor and kind of like collapsing on itself. And the entire room is laughing, even Ron. Now, the difference is that we're not trying to make fun of trauma or pain or fear in this. What we're actually doing is we're writing in a code. And so it's a code that you understand and nobody else does. So if you're writing something that maybe causes you a lot of shame or causes you a lot of sadness, causes you a lot of heartache, and you don't want other people to know, or if it's very personal to you and only certain people are allowed into that space with you, then this is writing in code where you're essentially allowing yourself to have this catharsis and not necessarily having to say the words out loud. So for example, the line, my mother hit me across the face with a wine bottle, could be turned into summer painted cherry flowers across my face with the sunset. Taking some poetic license in utilizing the words that delight us into creating a new scene where we understand the background of it, but it is now transcended into art. My brother hung himself after I didn't answer his phone call. My piano blew bubbles with its keys after I stopped playing. And now what do we do once we have this one line? We have the thing that we cannot say. We interrupt the fear or the pain or the negativity with our words that delight us. Now what? To flesh it out, I find it helpful for me to think of the words and images that go along with the phrase. So in this line, my piano blew bubbles with its keys after I stopped playing. What are some words and images that go with this phrase? We can have a new list of prelude, sonata, childish, roughhouse, prank, laugh, fun, jingle, jangle, composer, all of these different words that might go with piano, blow, bubbles, keys, or play. And other questions that I ask myself is, what happened before this? And then what happened as a result? So you almost have like a chronological before, during, and after. So if the during is my piano blew bubbles with its keys after I stopped playing, what happened before it? What was the piano doing when you were playing? Or what happened as a result after the bubbles blew from the piano? Then what happened? And it can be surrealistic. There are no rules here. It can be realistic or surrealistic. It could be nonsensical. It could be like a Lewis Carroll type of poem that's just complete nonsense. It's up to you and what helps you get the words down on the page. So this is a poem by Dinez Smith called My Poems. My poems are fed up and getting violent. I whisper to them, tender, tender, bridge, bridge, but they say, bitch, ain't no time, make me a weapon. I hold a poem to a judge's neck until he's not a judge anymore. I tuck a poem to my dick, sneak it on the plane. A poem goes off in the Capitol. I raise a glass in unison. I mail a poem to 3/4 of the Senate. They choke off the scent. My mentor said once, a poem can be whatever you want it to be. So I bury the poem in the river and the body in the fire. I poem a Nazi I went to college with in the jaw until his face hangs a bone tambourine. I poem 10 police a day. I poem the mayor with my bare hands. I poem the hands off the men who did what they know they did. I poem a racist woman into a whistle and feel only a little bad. I poem the president on live TV, his head raised above my head. I say Baldwin said, I call my loves and ask for their lists. I poem them all. I poem them all with a grin, bitch, poemed in the chair, handless, bolts ready to run me when they ask me what I regret. I poem multitudes, multitudes, multitudes. Now in this poem, Dinez Smith never did a workshop with me. I know that they didn't write this poem with the idea in mind of interrupting pain or negativity with a word that delighted them. But when I read this poem, I felt like it was in line with the kinds of exercises that I did personally. And I felt like it is a representation of how maybe you only want to like redact or censor certain words, and taking something that delights you and only substituting 1 or 2 words into the sentence. So that way it creates kind of a newer landscape. The examples that I have in the previous slides were more surrealistic, more along the lines of poesy. And so in this example, it's more realistic, and there's only certain words that you can kind of substitute in. So it's kind of like an indirect way of the reader really understanding what they're trying to accomplish in the poem. This is an example of a poem that I wrote utilizing this exercise called The Taste of Honey. Honeysuckle sprouted from the window as he tried to breathe the sweetness, laughing for more, 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 and the fragrant petals obeyed as more and more and more filled the panes with white, and splotches of yellow spilled through the grills onto the sill and still scoped the next inch to stretch its neck on cement. My father laughed, he laughed, couldn't stop laughing as the flowers poured out, their ever wanton tendrils reaching for more, more, more blossoms staking claim through birthright. I couldn't stop them, and he didn't want me to. Just more, till my father's body lied, covered in honeysuckle. No more laughter, only me and the flowers. And I just wanted to bloom my brains out too. And with this poem, people might read it and they can maybe kind of speculate what I'm talking about or what happened in this scene outside of the metaphor. But when I read it, I know what I'm talking about. It's a poem that I wrote for me. It's a poem that I wrote for my own pain and to get it out and to be able to just have that feeling of catharsis of not holding on to something anymore. I wrote it in code that I understand, and not every reader is going to understand the code. That's okay, and that's the point of the exercise. And so I want to take the next 8 minutes to do this exercise. So we'll share at the very end. Actually, maybe I'll do 7 minutes. We'll share at the very end after both exercises if you want to. So for this first exercise, we're going to start with the thing you cannot say and add specificity. We're going to replace some of the words with the words that delight you. If you come up with new words that delight you or that you feel fit better, use those. The rules are there are no rules. And then we're going to flesh it out using questions like what happened before and after. What are some other words that go along with the delightful words that you inserted into your phrases, and then going from there. So I will leave this here. I'm going to turn my video off because I'm also going to do the exercise. And then I will come back in 7 minutes. And time. If you want to come back to this exercise in the second exercise, then please feel free to do that, but we will move forward. The poets we'll be looking at right now is Harriet Mullen and Sandy Poole. And we'll be looking at the concept of the prose poem. The prose poem is a poem that does not have line breaks. It kind of straddles the line between prose and poetry. It usually follows traditional punctuation in its breaths, so not necessarily at the line break. You usually see it as a solid block of text. And it's usually short. You know, you're not going to have pages long of a prose poem. It usually fits onto one page. I've seen some longer ones, but typically it's not like that. Lyrical essays kind of follow the same pattern, though they're a little bit different from a prose poem, and they still use poetic language. It's not technical language. It's not scientific or academic language. It's definitely poetic language. So for an example, this is a poem called Kill Bugs Dead by Harriet Mullen. Kills bugs dead. Redundancy is syntactical overkill. A pinprick of peace at the end of the tunnel of a nightmare night in a roach motel. Their noise infects the dream. In black kitchens, they follow the food, walk on our bodies as we sleep over oceans of pirate flags. Skull and crossbones, they crunch like candy. When we die, they will eat us unless we kill them first. Invest in better mousetraps. Take no prisoners on board ship to rock the boat to violate our beds with pestilence. We dream the dream of extirpation, wipe out a species with God at our side, annihilate the insects, sterilize the filthy vermin. So in our second exercise, we're going to focus on writing a prose poem as if we're telling a story about the negative experience that happened to us. Sometimes writing a story in the first person saying, I did this, this happened to me. Sometimes that can create a block because we're not quite there yet. We haven't quite reached the part in our healing journey where we can vocalize, this is what happened to me. And when that happens, if that's not a place that you're currently in, you can try writing in the second or third person. It's an indicator to your brain, to your reptilian brain, that this isn't actually something that you're talking about happening to yourself. It's something that happened to this other person over there. And when processing trauma through different kinds of therapies, sometimes the goal is to create a connection in the brain where it feels like the negative experience happened a long time ago, even if it wasn't that long ago. But having that distance in the brain allows the individual to be able to cope better in the present. And I have found for myself personally that starting a poem in the second or third person, and then maybe even altering it later on to first person, has helped me just like on those stepping stones. So in an experience that happened to me, writing first as if it happened to someone else is just a stepping stone for me to be able to talk about it actually having happened to me. Another strategy that you can utilize in this exercise is that if you're not in a place where you feel comfortable, even not just like sharing with, the public, or just sharing with yourself, just acknowledging and writing on paper something happened to you, then change it. Change what actually happened, change what the details are so that you do feel comfortable. Write what you wished happened instead. Write what you wish you had said, or wish you had done, or wish someone had said, or someone else had done. Start there, and then work your way toward a more, I wouldn't say necessarily honest, but maybe a more realistic version of what actually happened in your memory. Baby steps are still steps. So this is an example of a second person prose poem by Sandy Poole. It's called Candy. You were never very good at grammar. Your modifiers dangled, your sentences snaked across the page, lazy anacondas, bloating adjectives. You once wrote about the time your mother tried to kill herself. You stood outside the bathroom door crying and wailing. She wasn't coming out. You remembered she wore a lime silk shirt that smelled of cigarettes. Her perfume was still smudged into your cheek. You said she bled into the turquoise tub, head flopped over, water soughing the edges. You said you thought beautiful women were sad and sad women were ugly. You liked the feel of old books, even though you didn't read them. You hated pantyhose, the smell of cat litter, the way your girlfriend cried after making love. At your mother's funeral, you stood hard against the wooden pews, kept your head upright. Outside, magpies quarreled relentlessly over a piece of rotten intestine. No one said anything. Your father handed you a hard striped candy and turned his eyes towards the window. Now, I don't know Sandy Poole. They're not a personal acquaintance of mine. So I don't know if they wrote this poem as a second person poem that actually happened to someone else, or if it's a personal memory. I don't know who the real speaker of the poem is. So I can't say that this prose poem really utilized my exercise by any means, but it's a nice example of a second person prose poem. This is an example of a third person prose poem that I wrote, and subsequently on my healing journey, I have a different poem called 11:15 p.m. where I write in the first person. That is still something that I'm not ready to share. 11:20 p.m. She woke on the chair across the room. She didn't remember standing or falling into the nurse's arms, only the lifetime she lived adrift in an alien world and a woman's underwater voice bubbling, "See, she was just in shock." Ears perked to her pounding socks, but the midnight hallway hushed. Dared not whisper when the nurse called to her, "Ma'am, you should really sit back down, ma'am." But she could not when her mother did not yet know. Her heart beat like a noose pulsing, gagging her tighter with each ring of the other line. Her mother's hello sing-songed with delight, with curiosity. She took a breath, listened to her mother's excruciating wail of confusion, the sound of her heart stopping. "Are you sure, honey?" her mother asked. "Are you sure? Did a nurse tell you?" All she could say was, "A nurse didn't have to tell me, Mom. A nurse didn't have to tell me." So in our next exercise, we are going to write a prose poem as if we're telling a story. If we feel challenged by using first person, then we can use second or third person language to indicate further to our brain that it's only a story. And that if we need to change the ending, if we need to change details of this story, then that is fine. And we can do that as well. If you want to combine the two exercises and write a prose poem and utilize words that delight you in place of words that are hard to say or hard to hear, then that is also an option. And I'm going to put 7 minutes on the clock again. And then I'm going to end my presentation. And we can share some of these poems that we write if you feel so inclined, or if you have questions for me, then that can be the time for that as well. All right, timer is on. I'm going to stop my video and mute while I work on the exercise as well. And we're going to start wrapping up, finishing up our last sentences. I want to thank everyone who has stayed until the end of the session. Thank you for being here. And now for the last part of this, when we're sharing our work, if people want to share their work, and actually maybe I should open up my notebook again. If you wouldn't mind having your cameras on, because it does add kind of like a more homey, engaging environment when people can see each other's faces, especially when they're sharing their work. It can feel kind of vulnerable speaking to a host of just black squares with white names in them. So if putting your camera on is something that feels comfortable for you, then I please invite you to do that. And I want to open up now if anybody has any questions, or if you would like to share one of your poems from the generative workshop, then please, now is the time. I can always go first too.
I'm happy to share mine if you like.
Sure, Denise, please. And tell us which exercise you're sharing, or which poem from which exercise you're sharing, or whatever it was, if it wasn't a poem.
Well, it was probably more the second exercise, although I used my prompts from the first request. And it's just a couple of 3 sentences with a title. It's called Radium Springs. The sweet old man views the canvas leaking through his glove from a distance, the entire vista. The self is out there acknowledging the excitement. That's it.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. It's funny because in my first poem, I also used the word canvas. So I will share mine since I feel like it's connected in that way. It doesn't have a title. It was just a, stream of consciousness almost. I will someday paint a song, a paean of boundless colors, prime and secondary, hues to make the hues to make the choir blush, like berries crushed in my palms. I wipe them on my canvas before the juicy paint, or before spreading the juicy paint with my tongue. And I put spreading in brackets because it's not the word I want to use. I feel like there's a better word to use, but I'm not sure what it is yet. So I'll have to think on that.
Thank you.
Did anybody else want to share any of their generative work or have any questions? And if not, that's okay. And you can always reach out to me. Otherwise, I can put my contact information. It was in the slides, but if you want to reach out to me on social media, you can find me at Anne Marie Wells Writer on Instagram and Facebook. And then if you want to send me a message, you can send one to me at annemariewellswriter@gmail.com. And Anne has an E on it. So if you forget the E, it'll go to someone else.
Anne Marie, thank you so much for your session today. I know for me, I have lots to think about with your prompts. And although I don't necessarily feel like sharing now, maybe in the future, I would be happy to do that. I'm sure some others are probably in the same boat. We do have just a couple minutes left, so I did just want to say one more time, if anyone has some questions for Anne Marie as well, and not just related to the prompts, but any of her work or any questions about writing, now would be a great time for that as well.
I don't know if I have answers, but I can try.
The pro and con, I think Anne Marie is of going last in the day as well, I'm sure. But on behalf of the Arts Council, the board and staff, I definitely wanted to say thank you for joining us today. And it was great. It was great to have your session as part of the Art Summit, and we look forward to working with you more in the future as well, for sure.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And thank you everyone who stayed and who participated. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. For everyone else, thank you for joining us today. We'll be ending our session in just a minute here, but I also want to just do a quick shout out for our session tomorrow. Tomorrow's our closing keynote with Beth Cantor, and we'll also have a kickoff. Governor Gordon will be joining us as well to kick off that session. So thank you for all you do, and we'll look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.